evening. Okay. Thank you all so much for coming out this evening. Just a couple announcements before we get started. If you're watching at home, please type any comments into the chat or comments on Facebook. This program is being recorded and will be available on the York County History Center YouTube channel. Some upcoming programs. Our Writers Roundtable program on March 2nd will feature Charles Stanbaugh. He'll be speaking about Forest Park and the York County Trial System. Our Genealogy Society program is Sunday, March 5th. That will be Tyler Stump speaking about Pennsylvania prison records. Our second Saturday speaker is Tom Davidson on Malin Haynes and the Shoe House. And our Civil War roundtable speaker is on March 15th is Randy Reyes talking about women at Gettysburg. We also have a distinguished speaker series coming up on April 18th. Eric Larson will be speaking at the Appel Center for this weekend. So right now, if you have any questions about our programs, please visit yorkhistorycenter.org. And I'm really happy to welcome Bill Armstrong and Steve Smith, who will be speaking about George A. Wood, who was killed in action in World War I. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. With all praises and glory to God. Cole, thank you for the introduction. And I'm really elated that you have this opportunity to share a story about a man that made a great sacrifice, but almost forgotten, but never truly forgot. I want to again thank you for joining us and thank Lynn, Allvets for inviting me along with the History Center. This evening, I'm going to share with you from my perspective of I never met my great uncle, so my perspective is him is pretty much handed down from my great grandmother. And so Annie Adams, Annie Wood was his mother. Over in Vegas, there's a number of artifacts that kind of speak to some proclamations, family pictures, and whatever. But let me first introduce my sister, Mary Wright. She's my youngest sister, and we get into the fact that there was 5 of us. I had 2 brothers and 2 little sisters. I was born here in York, 1942. Went to St. Pat, graduated from York Catholic in 1960. Went into the Air Force in summer 1961 and stayed into September 26, 1960. During my tour of duty, my first kind of encounter with things I wasn't really prepared for. And I first got in the Air Force for human crisis. And March of 1962, the interview in the service at that period of time. I was 18, 19 years old, and we definitely talking about things that we can't even understand and during the war. And we're sitting built the Air Force base in Jacktown, Florida. Which most of you know Jacktown, Florida. Basically, down and they want to be all basically mail truck and the food. But other than that, there's pretty much shut down. So I go home to my mother. I said, I'm got my bags packed. I may be going, so if I don't make it back, I guess that's the way that I had meant for it to be. So again, I stayed in the Air Force until 66. I got out in 66. I took it down with the GI Bill, and I went off to college at Maryland State College at that time, and finished up at 70. And 71, I went to Catholic University of America on a fellowship, and I finished that. When I spent 35 years making sure in the procurement profession. I worked 20 years at the University of Maryland College Park, I retired one time in 2004, they off a few years, and then I went back to work, and in 2011, I decided it was good time to hang it up. So, my mother was Melody Wood Armstrong, and a picture of her. And he is the great least, he's the least of Georgia Wood Jr. And that is the connection for him being my good uncle from my mother's side. He died in 2016. When he died in 2015, he was like the archivist of the document. So it's ended up with a lot of those documents that are over there, especially the letters between my grandmother and the United States government. And those letters go back to 1982, after his death, and go up to about 1921. All of which I eventually I'll be donated to the History Center as a part of them being able to continue history. I became interested in knowing more about George. As I said, my grandmother's nickname when he was little, so this picture over there is on her nightstand. That picture is in itself over 100 years old. And when I got older, I was thinking back in my mind, yesterday it had something to do with me going to the service. I think some respect I think it did. But also my father served in World War II. My great grandfather, that son Cole, served in the Civil War. University of Virginia did very extensive research on him, and if you go on the website and type in his name, they come up and he got wounded like punching. He was preaching. He was a pastor here in New York for a number of years before he died. My grandmother, Dr. Cole Armstrong, was an English scientist, and she has a, what do you call it? She has a
Exhibit upstairs. Yeah.
in the history center. So, my grandfather, he founded the Allvets here in New York. Funded up last 2023. And so, I guess to say the family's kind of been doing things that make a difference to you and people's lives. But anyway, my curiosity was perked up in 2010 when I did Jim McCoy's Almost Forgotten. And in that, he had a small episode of Martha being killed in the war. And then I found out that there was a tribute to him at the fairground, the name going at columns of the old courthouse. And so that kind of got me going in 2010. And then ironically, about 2020, I was talking to a young lady, Samantha Dawn, and she said, well, you should check it out. So I put his name in, and Rob's popped up, and so I started reading it. Okay. And then with that, I said, I got to pursue this guy. What I did, I followed the line, and it took me to the gentleman who was very detailed in terms of having done his research and put in perspective. I'm gonna say a little roadmap for you to be able to follow and see if I can get the whole story. And so in 2020, I reached out to Steve, and from that point, we kind of went down the road together, trying to put pieces together and find research documents, and then return and went in the direction of the enough now to reach out to the VA and business. And so we reached out to Terry, and we began to go down these sometimes it's like dark out through there and find nothing. And so I read an article, two sons of freedom, written by Jennifer Keys, and it's not and that talked about the 368, talked about the next 9. I talked, called Jennifer, and she put me in touch with a few other professors. We found some documents in conjunction with we found. And then, in the process of that, there was that book over there, Unjustly Dishonored, written by Robert Farrell, professor, but he's since passed. He talked about the injustice that was done to the United States because of the fact that they kind of dropped the ball and then the battle. The United States had pretty much support them in terms of their failure. And in the book, Doctor talks about the fact that they got misrepresented in terms of what they actually did, and they're ill prepared in terms of the war. In some cases, that shows up again in a number of articles out there in World War I. We weren't prepared to lead the fight for the nation. So we've been taking that and our guys lost their lives because they weren't prepared for the war. It's when time to combat they had to deal with and you have jets and bombers and we all know you're not fighting, like you're out here fighting. No place in the cover unless you find the tenant, So these guys were unjustly disgraced in some respect. I think there's a lot of push to clean up some of the misrepresentation that was placed on them in terms of threat and history service. So I'm going to touch on a couple of points because a lot of what I can say, I think it's better said in the context of Steve. He said, but I do want you to know that George had a brother, 2 sisters, one of the sisters was my mother's mother. We had a great aunt and a great friend, their mother still living in that. And when he died, he was a seasonal judge on this. He was buried in France for 3 years, 1919, 1921. 1921, he was an assistant to my great grandmother. He was brought back to New York. And I use a council cover of this book as a concept to kind of give you the new side. What Steve has done is truly a work of great sacrifice and time and his, and he can charge me penny. So I got all this research done and the story covered, and I think did you make copies of the documents?
Yes.
There's a handout that Steve is here to have, he can pass out, so that way, and you can, on the region, you can comment if you want to read through. So I don't think Steve will be able to cover in detail here as much as he covered there. And so, I think you will get a better insight. So without further ado, let me introduce to you the gentleman who has done one building jobs and telling the story of George A. Bush in World War I. We'll come back with a question and answer.
Well, I wrote a series of World War I posts on my Works Past blog site. It spanned 2017 through 2018, which commemorated the 100th anniversary of the United States involvement in World War I. Among the veterans that I featured in this post was Private First Class George A. Wood, who was the only black soldier from North County killed in action during World War I. Now, those posts that I wrote, those were done, like I said, in 2018, which was 2 years before Bill discovered them. So I was essentially looking at stories of veterans. I think I covered about 15 veterans from York County. And I began it by looking at the 2 permanent York County memorials erected to World War I veterans. There are 197 names on the 4 World War I bronze panels fronting the columns of the former York County Courthouse. Now the York County Administrative Center on East Market Street. Those bronze panels replaced wooden panels that were constantly updated during the war. A memorial committee put those panels together, and at the end of the war, they were basically cast in bronze, and those were the panels you see now. The other memorial to World War I veterans was part of a memorial gate project built at the York Fairgrounds. So the entrance on West Market Street was built as a memorial gate to World War I veterans. It features cast tablets containing the names of those that gave their lives in the defense of liberty. And the memorial gate tablets were dedicated October 4th, 1921. There are 7 names on the memorial gate tablets in addition to 197 on the courthouse steps. The spelling of surnames occasionally differs between those 2 panels. And George A. Wood is one example. He, his siblings, his father consistently signed their surname Wood, W-O-O-D. On the June 5th, 1917 draft registration cards for George A. Wood, he signed his name as George A. Wood, not Woods, and provides his date of birth as June 7th, 1888. The correct surname spelling of Wood is used on the memorial gate tablets at the fairground. In military records and the vast majority of federal agency records. The courthouse panels and a circa 1920 book entitled York County in the World War, and most newspaper articles incorrectly uses the Woods spelling, W-O-O-D-S. Now, this is important when you're doing research. You got to have the correct spelling, especially in military records. So almost all newspaper articles use Woods incorrectly. And the courthouse panels use Woods incorrectly. There are about 5 or I think 6 differences between the courthouse panels and the fairground panels. And the vast majority, the fairground panels are correct, which they probably took from military records. The ones on the courthouse was a committee that was put together during the war to collect the names. So that's how I think the misspellings occurred. Now, the best way to start your research in World War I veterans is via pension details. The Ancestry.com family history site has some original records on there. And one of those records is for George A. Wood. It was from a 1934 pension application from which was approved for his widow, Mrs. Biddy Wood. And Mrs. Biddy Wood is noted in some of those articles, or some of those correspondence that on the table over there. The most important piece of information on this card, as far as further research goes, is the Army serial number for George A. Wood, which is 1798996. That's important because, and Bill knows this, when you write for records, many of them require a social security number because you're usually asking for records of World War II veterans. And you send in an application of, you want this record, you wait weeks, they send it back, well, you forgot to put a social security number on. World War I veterans that died in action do not have social security numbers. So you have to send another application explaining he doesn't have a social security number. And he sent his Army serial number with it, and they can't find the correct one. They'll send something else back. So you have to deal with that bureaucracy continually. Bill knows, I know. Now, essentially, that card noted that George A. Wood was colored, that he was born in Frederick, Maryland, that he lived at 432 South Court Street when inducted in York on October 29, 1917. He served in the 368th Infantry and was promoted to private first class on April 16, 1918. He served overseas from June 15, 1918 until his death on September 29, 1918, from wounds received in action. Now, census, newspaper articles, and Bible and family history records available at the History Center and on Ancestry.com provide the early history of George. Now, I'll just do a brief couple comments here. Now, George A. Wood, he either signed a George A. Wood or very occasionally George A. Wood Jr., because he was the son of George A. Wood Sr. And for the first 15 years of his life, the family lived in Frederick County, Maryland. By about 1905, the family moved to York, Pennsylvania, and initially resided at 316 South Howard Alley, with his father working as a machine operator. The 1910 census indicates the families continued to reside at 316 Howard Alley. George is working, George A. Wood, who was the Army veteran killed in action. He was a laborer at an ice machine company, most likely York Manufacturing Company, which became York International, now Johnson Controls. His father and brother James also worked at that company. His father was likely a machinist there, and his brother James was a laborer, as was George. Now, George A. Wood, like I said, he served in the 368th Infantry Regiment. Within that regiment, he was in the 41st Machine Gun Battalion. Now, the 368th Infantry Regiment trained at camps throughout the Northeast and the Midwest. During that training, sometime between October 29, 1917, when he was inducted, and June 15, 1918, when he was shipped off overseas, during leave was when he married Minnie, who was his widow that submitted the pension application in 1934, which was approved. You don't know a lot about Minnie. The 92nd Division included 4 African-American infantry regiments: the 365th, 366th, 367th, and 368th. The enlisted personnel and junior officers were entirely African-American, while all the regimental and division senior officers were white. Now, after the 368th Infantry Regiment arrived in France, they received additional training under the command of the French Army. Many of the African-American regiments were actually placed under the French command. Their training was considered complete on August 12, 1918. So from the time that they arrived in France, they only had about 1 month of training. And essentially, they were considered trained by that time. They were placed under the command of the French 38th Corps and ordered to attack the German line on September 26, 1918. After 4 days of grueling battles, the French 38th Corps, with their supporting regiments, failed to achieve the breakthrough, and they got blamed for not doing that. And it was from wounds received in that battle that George A. Wood lost his life. Now, he lost his life in the 3rd day of that 4-day battle. Now, he was reported as killed in action according to newspaper articles, but according to official records, he was killed in action, or he was killed because of wounds received in action. The difference is if a medical officer reaches you and you're still alive, and then you die a few minutes later or days later, you're considered died of wounds received in action, not killed in action. So there's the distinction, and it shows up in later records. Now, essentially, PFC George A. Wood body was temporarily interred near the French burial ground in a temporary cemetery. And by the armistice of November 11th, 1918, there were over 7,600 United States soldiers buried in temporary battleground graves. No remains of fallen World War I soldiers were returned to America until well after the war ended. It was General Pershing who argued that burying servicemen in soon-to-be-constructed permanent American cemeteries near the battlegrounds with their fallen comrades offered the greater glory. However, most Americans were not in agreement with that plan. Finally, it was agreed to leave this decision up to each of the individual fallen soldiers next of kin. Nationwide, beginning in 1921, remains of roughly 60% of the fallen World War I soldiers were returned to the United States. The number was significantly higher in York County, where the remains of 78% of the fallen soldiers were returned to this country for burial near their hometowns. Now, Mrs. Annie Adams, the mother of PFC George A. Wood, requested his body to return for burial in York. Basically, the body of George A. Wood, a newspaper article on Saturday, August 6, 1921, noted, provided details of the funeral of George A. Wood, quoting that in one paragraph. Services over the body of George Wood, son of Mrs. Anna Adams, 434 Susquehanna Avenue, were held Saturday morning at St. Patrick's Catholic Church. Born on a caisson provided by the local post of the American Legion and guarded by comrades who served with Wood, and those comrades actually came from across the United States. They weren't all local. There's a flag strap, right, and flower-covered casket was taken from the undertaker's establishment of W.J. Boyle and Company on South George Street. The funeral cortege proceeded to St. Patrick's Church, where a high mass of requiem was conducted at 9:00 a.m. by the pastor. After the services, the body was taken to St. Patrick's Cemetery, where interment was made. Now, I tried in researching the post, those were occurring in May of 2018. And I was planning to start researching another veteran when fate, or maybe it was a divine intervention, caused a change of plans. Because while I was volunteering at the library and archives here, a patron asked about the proximity of persons buried in St. Patrick's Cemetery. The History Center's bound cemetery books were pointed out. They contain inscriptions of gravestones for all cemeteries and graveyards in York County, gathered during the 1930s. Near the top of the page upon which the paper asked the question was the recorded inscription, Wood, George A., Private, HEG Company, 368 Infantry. That was one of those wow moments. Like, I didn't expect him to be buried in St. Patrick's. I expected him to be buried in Lebanon Cemetery, where most of the blacks are buried in York County. So I tried to locate the gravesite after seeing that. And I was expecting an easy find because I presume since it was close to Memorial Day, there'd be a small flag on the grave. And also the area that was being investigated by the patron, she said was close to the entrance. So I had like a small area to look at and all I had to do was look for the flags. Well, I went to the cemetery and I could not find any gravestone. And in a follow-up visit, I saw some graves with family members of Zinn, Connellan, and Neighbor, which were names, family names close to that name in the cemetery book. So I knew I was in the right area. So I basically went back a couple times and tried to pin down the area, which was difficult. And the goal was to, I got to a point where I was pretty confident that it was in one certain area. And then I started dealing with the cemetery manager. Now, the cemetery is managed by a person that the records aren't really that clear than older cemetery. And I was informed the records for this cemetery are not indexed and they're difficult to find the records. And it would take a lot of time and he was too busy and it's like all these dealings with them and still well aware of it. So it was probably about 5 months I was dealing with them, trying to determine where the gravesite was and what happened to the gravestone, because the records indicated in the 1934 records that are here at the History Center, if they're a tin marker or a wooden marker, they're noted so in the records. So this was a stone marker, and we later discovered it was the original marker was actually government issued marker. That was a stone marker that was there. So we don't put out of that. So when I did some additional research in the family history because the cemetery manager was basically telling me, I don't know what I'm talking about. But he said, you don't understand cemetery records. I said, I'm sure this is where it's located. Where it's located. So I did some additional family history research. I wanted to see if there's gravestones of other family members there. That's when I discovered the gravestone of Anna Adams, his mother. And then nearby was a gravestone of Wood's sister, Catherine, who was married to John Keyes. So I said, it looks like this is the area for the cemetery books. It had to be in this area. And I'm finding his other relatives are in this area and confirm this is the location. Well, he basically told me that, yeah, that's correct. But the thing is, I'm not going to give you the exact name and I can't. And what you have to do is you have to be a family descendant to provide for me to provide the information. I said, I can't give this out. So I basically wrote in a follow-up post in 2018, and it appears, and this is quoting, it appears the most descendants of World War I veteran George A. Wood are via his niece, Mary L. Todd Armstrong. It falls to one of these descendants to initiate the marking of the grave of PFC George A. Wood through the cemetery manager. So I'll leave it up there and have Bill explain maybe his dealings with the cemetery manager or how we got the marker on the cemetery.
Yeah, it is more impressive. Well, all of us veterans, ain't dealing with the government. No, it's, are you gonna get there, but you wait. But anyway, yeah, and so, that was a, dealing with, I'm gonna say Joe, next, Joe, I'm gonna read that one time, was a very interesting, experience. The only thing I think that saved me with dealing with Joe was the fact that my mother was there and whole saved the cemetery. And Joe and I were able to relate to the fact that there's somebody who's holy savior that connected to my family and all of them, so therefore he was responsible for the same task. So he went out and dug around and said, ways he can't find gravestones. So we assumed that from 1921 up to 2008, 2020, or 2019, when he started out that possibly it could have something in the ground 100 years. I mean, we all know most of those dead stones don't rest in something solid about the ground. Possibilities of grass goes over it and all this stuff. But anyway, so once I was aware of the fact that I had to be the one, there was a little bit of, but even with the government, I was not a direct descendant. So there was this battle back and forth with the VA about whether or not I could be the one who could request these things. So if Terry was able to work through the bureaucracy of that and prove that I was, as Steve indicated, my mother was pleased. And so therefore, we began to have dialogue about it. So eventually, Terry was able to get a headstone. Well, for some reason, when the headstone came in the first time, it had 5 on it. And so we said, that won't work. And so we went back and forth, and they needed some, the government needed some documentation, said we needed PLC. And so we got that. Then, when we got to the point of getting the Purple Heart, we went back to them again and said, now we need to have the Purple Heart and the signature put on it. So we went back, we had 3 headstones before it was all said and done. But the 3rd headstone was active, PFC, Purple Heart. And so, and then it had the metal insignia for the flags. So now, from my perspective, I can rest in peace. I've done as much as I can do to make sure it is forever lasting and long as it stays up on the ground, that it will be there permanently. So and it's right next to my grandma, great grandmother, and my Aunt Kate and Uncle Sanders on the backside. My brother's also buried out in that cemetery. So I had some concerns about the other people and we made a little some inquiries and multiple people that I really cared for. I think that the cemetery should be everlasting memorials to sacrifices that not only that, veterans made, but people who are just very dignified places. And so we know this issue of cemeteries being properly maintained is a universal issue throughout the United States. There's a lot of organizations and programs being put together now to win these cemeteries. But he had a problem. It took us that process to get to the next step of being able to document and petition the Army to award them the Purple Heart for assembly. And again, working with Steve and Terry, doing documentation, we were able to. Well, I had to get my Congress, my senator involved because they were dragging their feet about certain documentation and we had certain records and the record center was closed, as through the pandemic and nothing happened. And it was like, Come on, that's can't be that hard. So we had to go ahead and do all the research to find documents to support. And the document that Steve refers to, diving in action was the kingpin to unlock the situation. And once they got that, the rest of it was kind of easy, but when I first went to Terry, I thought I would have to probably look at that, but Terry was very accommodating. He probably did a yeoman's job in terms of staying the course, because he probably just said, okay, there's too many barriers to break, and I don't have time to put into it, but we do that. He stayed with me, and we got it done. And then we all the valley recognized him, and the Golden Garden recognized him in terms of his name being inscribed there and the monuments out there. And again, I contribute that success to Steve and to Terry and the other people that money used to. It took 103 years for the United States government to bestow him off for something he couldn't not to make that good. But again, to do it back the process and the time. My great grandmother at that time, she was up in the 80s, and so she had a fight, and she was expecting to have a fight. But thank God, it's smart enough to say those letters, because those letters were really something the government couldn't see. Had all the tracking, serial numbers, everything that they needed, even though they said they're grown up, they were keep them. And I guess I got from my mother, because she just passed them down. You know, at first I didn't think a whole lot about them until I really got into pursuing these. So yeah, it's a lot of history there. Steve said, I mean, you know better than you got to get back and forth, and they don't want to pick up money. He had a death benefit. They didn't want to give her his death benefit, you know. Then some senators got involved in it, they got a job, she got I think $500, and she got a pension for $20 a month the rest of her life. So, but it wasn't easy. And my great grandmother, I'm not even sure how she could communicate with him. She had a very limited education, and so I'm sure somebody was there. I feel confident somebody himself. I would tend to be between my aunt and my grandmother. They were being able to deal with the correspondence. But it was, as Steve was indicating, they wrote to my grandmother, who was married and white, and then asked the question: was Mitty recognized by the family as George's wife? And that was in 1920. And so therefore she must have answered it correctly, as we said again in the country. 14 years later. Took that long? Yeah. Yeah. How long did it take to get this done?
Well, I started in 2018 on the research, and the Purple Heart was awarded the last Memorial Day. So that's 4 years.
Was that a requirement back then to give, because my grandpa got a Purple Heart in World War I, but I never saw one laying around. I don't know if he did it or maybe he never got one and didn't care.
You basically had to apply for it. That was after the fact. So you had to supply the information. You had to go out and gather the information and supply that to the government to get that during World War I. Now it's automatic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it was,
Needs to have the information. That's what makes you sick.
Yeah, it was frustrating at some points in time, but I mean, I think the blessing of God, and I guess I'm a Georgia, so that's all, military mind is press on, something will happen one way or another, so we pressed on, it happened, and so, I'm just overwhelmed with the fact that, we got it done, and persevered, and I think I have a great admiration for both Steve and Terry for being committed. But see, somebody said, I got time to do that. And I have to put it in context in terms of, you have to think in terms of the way society thinks sometimes. I mean, some people are gonna say, I'm not gonna do that for African American, I'm not gonna put that kind of time into it. That's not an interest to me, so I have to take my hat off Steve, because as I said, if he had never known what he did, and by the grace of God, I hadn't met it. It never would happen. And so, it's something that makes me proud to be in New York, because even though it took 140 years for them to get it right, they got it right. And those proclamations and commentary was made at the Memorial Day celebration, and the tributes and kind words that were passed, kind of help to realize that people appreciated the fact, even though he didn't get the opportunity to hear something that was said about his sacrifice. I have no messages and no memories I can carry with me, and I can pass on to those of my family members who may be watching tonight, that he made a sacrifice that is crazy. I mean, he's fighting for a country to be free, but here in America, he wasn't free at that point in time. He was free in some respects, he wasn't free. And we all know in terms of the passage of time, how things have changed, but at that point in time, he laid down his life for the country, he didn't see it, totally, what it means, he's fighting to help somebody else. And so, and I go back to myself, I was in Air Force, I had some things that, left over Air Force base and getting back in the body. So, it's kind of disheartening to see, and I'm not sure other guys in the world. I see you today, and the next time I see you, I'm looking down and you can't speak for me. I had about 15 partners when I was in the Air Force, and I'm the last one of my 15 partners that's still living. Not that only 2 of them got killed in the service, the rest of them passed away, as life is, so to speak. And so, then having been in the military, I was changed, even though it was sometimes wasn't what I wanted to be, but I was changed and stand for nothing in the world. And I take my hat off to the Union American, and I belong to both, and so I believe it's important too. And I'm always going to do that, and I do that. I believe more so to the extent that I think my great uncle would be very pleased to know that someone is carrying on what he kind of committed to in terms of his sacrifice. Freedom's not free. People may think it, but freedom's not free. Somebody's got to pay the price. Bad treatment when you come back home. And the government sometimes is resistant to honoring the commitment we made to serving our country, and they seem to think that it ain't important moments. I know right now I'm fighting the VA on some things. It's like this still money they're trying to give to somebody that somebody who deserves to get benefit from. And I know that you guys who I'm not gonna say it's destitute, but it took me 14 years to get my benefits. I was like, why? And I
Power of attorney.
Oh, I ended up going to my senator, and after that, it's pretty much an open door. This same thing happened to Purple Heart. We went to the senator and they got the facts. Everything moved, but I mean, so it's a daunting task if you're not prepared for the long. And which to me is crazy, because It didn't take them that long to put us in the service and get it done, put it in the wall, you know, and that wasn't no long process. That was, okay, boom, 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 take you through, we all know, I mean, who would think about, in his case, he got less than 3 months of training to go to war. They got over there and found out that they weren't properly trained and then had the casualties that they ended up having. It's really upsetting that someone would make those kind of for people to lay down their lives and not be prepared to, undertake the task they would get to take. So having all said that, there's a lot about if you really want to get into some of the more salient points of your story that you made in that session. I think that the handout that Nicole provided you, give you some of that. But what I would like to leave you with is that I take my hat off to Nicole, her staff, his group, men for writing me, and I thank you guys for taking time out of your evening to come out and hear the story of the first and only African American killed in World War I. And when I think about it and listen to some of what has been said in terms of even some of these books, it's just kind of mind-blowing and things happen and you take a hat off to the ones who did come and the ones that they can't find. The numbers and in some cases when World War I stagnant. A lot of things going on. But anyway, anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
I've got two for you. Where is St. Patrick's Cemetery, number one? Number two, you mentioned about a previous relative who served in the Civil War. What do we know about him?
My grandfather, I'm guessing Summer Cole. He was in the war, Civil War, he got wounded, he was out of Virginia. He was a slave, he left the slave plantation at 15 years old and crossed over into the Union lines. And he ended up in Connecticut. And he got wounded. And he was buried at Lebanon Cemetery, which is out of North Street. Number of, as Steve indicated, that's, well, other than Potter's Hill, I guess, that's the only place African Americans are buried back in the day. St. Pat's Cemetery is you go out George Street.
Is it close to Violet Hill?
Violet Hill, yeah.
Okay, all right.
Right. Yeah, it's buried there. And I'm real proud of the fact that they did a super job with his headstone because, a lot of the service is listening and, it's not a year old yet, but they did a super job. Yes, sir.
I'd like to recognize you and Jerry for helping you and doing everything, recognize. Father and Belinda for letting this happen now. It's going to be the history center story for posterity.
Well, the only thing I can say in wrapping up is that my Uncle George made a sacrifice that ultimately his family, as it's been said in terms of where his name is inscribed, his story is well documented by Steve, and I think for young folks to be able to read up on the story of the local soldier. I don't know many others. I think there are a couple other guys in New York that got killed during various wars. I don't know that many, but the fact of the matter is they were all heroes. They may have not all got Purple Hearts, many of them or whatever, but they did that. And the guy sent it over the beach, thank you, guys. And to, I have to say, it, my great grandmother was persevering. I think. I may have given up on him, but, you know, he persevered and, he bought his buying home and, you know, we're better off knowing where he is as opposed to him being buried someplace overseas and not knowing whether or not, you know, anybody's ever can buy him. Thank you for the time they got his life, so he persevered. And I would thank my mother that he could have not seen the value of those letters and, just gotten rid of them, all pictures and,
Not to keep them,
absolutely. They would have seen the tournament, the whole situation. So,
So if you were gonna look somebody up, because my grandfather in World War I, you got to go for ancestry.com to start with.
yeah, that's right there. Put his name in there. Start from there.
I'm gonna do it.
Good. Yeah, there's a group down in Virginia that the government has designated the, I can say, let me use for better word, clearing now. If you think your family member or someone has done something significant that warrants consideration for medal of honor and purple hearts, even though it's been many years, they supposedly have a documentation process that would allow them to run the military. Those boys have a piece on there, it's throughout those things, mainly Doughboys is World War I organization, and they have a very extensive amount of people who died in the war, died in World War I particularly. And they also are advocates for making type things that things get made right at the time. And so there's a couple of organizations out there. And World War I, as you know, that a monument downtown Washington, you see open, I guess, maybe less than 5 years ago. And if you go on Doughboys, you can see that they're very much involved with it. Very nice place. Very nice place. Anyway, ladies and gentlemen, again, on behalf of my great uncle, David Wood Jr., I thank you for the opportunity and I appreciate you taking time out of your evening.
Yeah. It's kind of some that, yeah.